Making a storybook with AI tools. I just did a small project for my oldest grandson, and since it actually came out reasonably well, especially for a first attempt, I thought I would share the thought process and the tools I used. In a nutshell, I created a sort of video storybook using free tools, including some AI resources. I initially used ChatGPT to generate a, quote, funny kids story, and used it as the basis for the project. After preparing the actual script, I went to ElevenLabs and used their Prime Voice AI to produce the narration. I then used Stable Diffusion to create artwork for the story, and finally put some background music in place and made the whole thing into a video. The goal is to have my grandson provide the stories, which I will then make into narrated videos, which I think he'll get a kick out of. He can even watch his own stories with his baby brother when he gets a little bigger. I'm sure you can come up with other uses for these sorts of tools, but here are some of the details to my process. By the way, I have links below in the video description for all the resources I used, none of which currently cost any money, but some may have you create a free account to use additional features. If you are creative, you could of course create your own stories, whereas I simply prompted ChatGPT to whip something up, and it worked well enough. In the future, I hope to use it with my grandson's story ideas, and ChatGPT could fill in the blanks to make up some kind of yarn. It seems to be reasonably good at that. When using the ChatGPT interface, you can use qualifiers such as short story or grade school reading level, and so on, to adjust the results. You'll probably need to edit it to some degree, but it certainly works well enough to get something on paper, so to speak. The OpenAI site that hosts ChatGPT is also listed below in the video description, and you need to either create a free account or you can use an existing Microsoft or Google account to log in and use the product, which, as I said, is currently free. Once I had the script ready, I could have narrated it myself, of course, and while I may do something like that in the future, I kind of wanted this to feel more like my grandson's creation, and putting a different voice in there just felt right. I used one of the free AI voices from ElevenLabs, which I think you will agree sound pretty remarkable. I'll play the storybook video towards the end of this presentation so you can see what I'm talking about. Again, you do need to create a free account or use your Google or Facebook login, and that gives you an allowance of 10,000 characters a month. That can go pretty quickly, so make sure your script is error-free before pasting it into the form to be processed. Of course, you can get a paid account, which gives access to more voices and more capacity. You can adjust some settings, probably more in the paid version, and then download the narration as an MP3 file. While I didn't initially make any adjustments for this project, I did slow down the narration by about 10% after the fact, since it sounded slightly rushed to my ears. I did that using Audacity in such a way that the pitch did not change. It appears from the website that the AI processing considers what is being read and tries to apply the appropriate pauses and inflection. Whatever they do, it seems to work surprisingly well, at least in the limited testing I've done. You can also try slightly different phrasing if you're not getting the results you want. For this story, I used an online version of Stable Diffusion, which is also currently a free service. Like ChatGPT, when you enter your text prompt to create an image, you can use modifiers, and indeed there can be quite an art to using the correct language to get the results you're after. As I am not an expert in this, I kept it pretty simple and just added in the style of Ghibli, which usually produces a sort of whimsical line drawing effect with watercolor-like shades, which I thought was appropriate for a kid's story. The default image size with Stable Diffusion is 512 by 512 pixels, which is pretty small in this day and age. If you feel you need it, there are plenty of AI upscalers available online that can bump up the resolution. Just to be clear, these are static images, not animations. There are some very experimental AI-assisted animation products, but as of April 2023, they are really still just a curiosity. It did take me a little while to come up with a dozen or so suitable illustrations I used, but as I said, I'm not an expert in this, so there are likely shortcuts to getting more precise and consistent results. Sometimes I just could not get exactly what I wanted, and so I had to get a little creative as I edited my available materials together. In my case, I used Audacity and Kdenlive to produce the audio and actually put the video together. I suspect pretty much any audio and video editing combination should work for you, as this was pretty straightforward stuff. I slowed the video down a bit, as I mentioned before, added some background music, and did some simple transitions between the still images, as this was just a short piece. More of a proof of concept than anything else, really. So, here is the finished result, and while it could certainly be improved, I think it works pretty well for what it is.
Once upon a time, there was a boy named Geordie who loved to explore the woods behind his house. One day, he decided to go for a walk among the trees and the tall grass to see if he could find anything interesting. He walked for a few minutes in the morning sun, looking at interesting things like bugs and puddles. He was looking at a ladybug when he suddenly heard something very close by. It sounded like a growl, but he couldn't see anything around him. He stood very still, then heard the noise again. Geordie got scared and started to run, but he tripped and fell face first into some mud. After a moment, he sat up and laughed, because he realized that the noise he had heard was just his stomach growling. He had forgotten to eat breakfast before going on his walk. Geordie chuckled all the way home, where he changed his muddy clothes and ate some pancakes. From that day on, he made sure to never go for a walk in the woods on an empty stomach. Sometimes the scariest things in life are just our own hungry tummies.
I have to say, it was a fun project to do, and hopefully I'll get to do a few more, this time using my grandson's creative input. Thank you for watching, and check out the links in the video description below.